I like sometimes to go on my computer and to read quotes that people make. Some of them are interesting, some of them are intriguing, and some of them are very puzzling. And a lot of those quotes is very dependent upon your view of things. Someone made the quote, they said, "Don't let your loyalty become slavery. If they don't appreciate what you bring to the table, let them eat alone." And you think, well, yeah, that's how a lot of people think today. I read another quote. It said, "There is something wrong with your character if opportunity controls your loyalty." And I thought, yeah, that's right. And that does seem to be what's going on in the world a lot. If you look at how things are going in our society and in our country and in elections and in all these different things, that's kind of what's going on. See, loyalty is one of those things that has slowly eroded in our society. As we start getting further from God, we start losing perspective of things, and loyalty is one of those. When I was growing up as a kid, I was taught that you were loyal to people. If you were someone's friend, you were loyal to them. That didn't mean you supported everything they did if they did something wrong, but you were loyal to your friend. You would tell them they were wrong. But that was loyalty. You were loyal to your work. I mean, my mom and dad were loyal to the store they went shopping for groceries in. Loyalty was a big thing. You were loyal in business. You know, if you live in Camrose, you shop in Camrose. That kind of thing. And that's kind of gone out the window today. That loyalty isn't there anymore. It's kind of like, what can I get? And how can I get it? Or what can I get away with? Whatever it is. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but as you read Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 20, it talks about putting on the armor of God. And really what Paul is talking about there in some way is that we have to be loyal to Christ, to God. It's about being loyal to Him. Paul instructs the church to be strong in the Lord, to put on the whole armor of God because of the fight we're in, the war that we're fighting against sin. And he said, it's not just in the flesh and blood that you're fighting, it's in the cosmic powers against the rulers of this present darkness and the spiritual forces of evil in the spiritual realms. And so Paul is talking about there's a battle going on between good and bad, good and evil, God and Satan, whatever, however you want to term it. And in that battle, if you're going to fight for Christ, he says you need His armor. You see, you're not going to do it by yourself. If we're Christians, we are fighting in Christ's army, and we need to have that armor. And so keeping loyal is kind of the idea of putting on the armor of Christ and fighting for Him. And there's a hymn that we sing that picks up this idea. In fact, you'll see on the hymn that it says it's written in reflection to Ephesians 6, 10 through 20. And that hymn is called "To Christ Be True." Yeah, that's the one that David said we're going to sing at the end. And we sing this hymn quite often, but I find myself more and more as I sing hymns wondering if I fully understand what I'm singing. If I really get what I'm singing, or if I really mean from my heart what I'm singing, or am I just mouthing words? And so I was looking at this hymn this week, and I was singing it. Well, I started singing it, and of course I'm glad that no one else was around because it probably scared them away. But I thought, man, there's a good sermon there. See, he starts out in the first stanza, and he says, "To God be loyal," or "to Christ be loyal and be true. His banner be unfurled." when the Roman army marched out of their gates into the field for battle, they would unroll this huge banner. And it was on 2 poles. And there'd be one man on each pole carrying that banner. And that banner was saying who they were. They were the Roman army. And they were coming to battle. And they had no intention of losing. And those men carried that flag right to the battle. And if they didn't, they'd have been killed and someone else would have picked it up because they were unpatriotic. And so they were what you would call the modern flag bearers. You know, you see that at the Olympics and at different places, people carrying the flag. Well, that flag is the same thing as a banner. And so they were doing that. And the songwriter wants us to realize that every day as we go out, what we're singing when we sing that song is, we're unfurling your banner. We're unrolling or rolling out the banner of Christ. And we're holding that up. And we're letting people know that we are in the army of Christ and that we are fighting for righteousness. So let's get that banner unfurled. And he says, and borne aloft till is secured. Borne aloft. They held it up. It was high up. And the reason for that was that everybody would see it and would know. They didn't hide the fact that they were the Roman army. They broadcasted it because just the broadcast of that put the fear in people. What about the banner of Christ? That needs to be broadcasted. That needs to be held high to put the fear in people of what they are doing in contrary to Christ. It didn't matter how the battle was going. That banner never wavered. And part of the reason was for that because the Romans probably won more battles than they lost until the end of their kingdom. And so they would march victorious under that banner, and they would march victorious with that banner back to the city. The only time that banner didn't fly is when they were defeated. The songwriter here picks up on that idea and says that the banner of Christ needs to be held aloft, needs to be held high. We need to keep letting people know about Christ and that we are in his service. It needs to fly high until the conquest of the world. What is Christ's goal in all of this? Christ's goal is to win every soul back to his Father in heaven. That's his goal. But, having said that, people have choice. And God doesn't override that choice. And so if they choose not to, then they choose to get the consequences of not doing that. But we need to be holding that banner high until Jesus says that's it, it's all over. And he comes back to take us home. And so Paul says in Ephesians 6, that's why you put on the shield of faith. That's why you put on the belt of truth, the helmet of salvation, the word which is the sword of the Spirit, the breastplate of righteousness, and the gospel of peace. We wear that in service to our King, Christ Jesus. And we raise that banner high, announcing that for the whole world to see until he comes and takes us home. So when we sing that song, we're saying, let's unroll that banner. Let's hold it up high and let's keep it up there until our King has victory. And then the second stanza, he says, there's more to it. Here's how that happens. He says, he needs brave volunteers. Have you ever thought of it that way? When you were baptized into Christ, you signed up to his army. You enlisted in his army. And you have said, I will go to battle for you. I will fight for what you fight for. When we put on Christ, we're enlisted into that army, and that army is not for the faint of heart. I can tell you that right now. No one's ever claimed that being a Christian is for the faint of heart. Some people make that statement when they don't want to accept Christianity. But being a Christian is anything but for the faint for heart. In truth, it's the opposite. Of all people, we should be the bravest. Because what we're doing is taking on a world of unrighteousness. Well, we're not taking it on alone. Christ is with us, and he is our strength. But we are taking on a world of unrighteousness, and we're fighting for righteousness' sake. If we could just roll the pages of history back and talk to the apostles and talk to some of the Christians in the first century that were martyred and the horrendous deaths they suffered, and just ask them one question, say, were you brave, or was it just, did you have a faint heart? The answer would be they were brave. They did not have a faint heart. They enlisted into the army of Christ, and they said, we will march to our death in the strength of the Lord. And so they did. And so he needs those kind of brave volunteers. And the reason we need to be brave volunteers is because we're standing up against the powers of sin. Now, I don't know about you, but I've come to figure out that the powers of sin are very powerful. That it's more than I can handle by myself. I can't handle it by myself. I need the armor of God. I need the strength of the Lord. And I'm going to tell you, it's not only me that's figured that out. The Lord knows it too. That you can't go it on your own and fight the power of sin. It will overcome you. And you got to take that, you can take that to the bank. You can believe that. It is too powerful for you to fight on your own. All you have to do is look at our country and see how the power of sin is one by one taking our values and our virtues and our practices of righteousness and turning them around, chipping away at all of what the foundation of our country was laid on for the desires and enticements of sin. And it's at a record high. It's happening rampantly. It is not easy to stand against the gates of Hades unless you are in the army of the Lord and you have the right tools for the battle. And those tools are the armor of God in Ephesians 6:10-20. So as an enlisted member of the army of the Lord, you are called to stand against the powers of sin, not moved by frowns or fears. Sin in all its ugliness recruits servants for its purpose every day. People, even though they know some things are wrong, will cave to the power of sin. Now, you and I know sin's already lost. The ultimate battle. But he's still trying. And so, one of his greatest weapons outside of death is fear. He uses fear to intimidate people. And the songwriter says, when we sing that song, when we sing that hymn, we're saying we're not going to be moved by fear or by frowns. And frowns there is for ridicule and all of those things. We're not going to be moved by those things. You know, I've seen Christians talk the talk, and when it comes to the walk, all of a sudden they cower and turn and go, and they're no more. And you go, what happened? I believe they didn't have the armor of God on. I believe that. I also believe that they weren't fully committed to their enlistment in the army. When Jesus came up out of the grave, victorious over death, he took away the greatest fear, the greatest tool that Satan had to try and sway us to his way. When we don't have to fear death anymore because we live, because we know Christ lives, Satan has no power over us. That victory changed the course of the whole battle. That is the one that changed everything. And it is also the one that Satan realized, I'm done. He was beat because he no longer has that tool. Jesus has taken all of that away. And so you and I can undauntedly march forward without fear. Just march forward for the army of Christ and for righteousness. We don't have to fear what may come. I've heard a lot of people sing this song really loud and really bravely in assembly. But how do we know for sure that those people or that we are loyal to Christ? The third stanza, he says, in noble service prove. In Luke chapter 16, Jesus said, you can't serve two masters. Either one you'll love and the other one you'll hate. One you'll serve faithfully, the other you'll ignore, let go, and he won't like you. He said, it just doesn't work. You can't serve two masters. And then in Luke chapter 4, he's already told them the master they should be serving. He says, you need to worship God and him alone shall you serve. And as Christ's children, as Christ's people, we have chosen to serve that God. When we become Christians and enlisted in the army, we are no longer our own masters, but we're Jesus is our master, and we serve him and his cause, his purpose, his will. If not, we haven't truly converted from the world to his army. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1, Paul says that offering our bodies as living sacrifices is our spiritual worship. It is our service to God. So he says that in noble service, so we're talking about serving Christ. He says in that noble service, you will prove your faith and your fidelity. Now, what is fidelity? Have you ever thought about that? You read some of these words, you look at some of these words and you say, yeah, I sing that all the time. But what is that? Fidelity is very interesting. It only means that you are faithful to a person, a cause, or belief demonstrated by your continuing loyalty and support. That is fidelity. So what he says is, in that verse, he says you will prove your faith and your faithfulness. That's what he's saying. But he used the word fidelity. And so when we nobly serve Christ, we are proving our faith in him. And that makes sense. Because if we don't serve him, we're proving that we don't have faith in him, aren't we? And so we serve him to prove our faith so we can see it in the service that we do or the life that we live. Living our lives for Christ and his will is what we've enlisted to do, and it proves our belief and our trust in Jesus, who leads us in triumphant victory. There's always the opposite, of course, where we prove the lack of faith, but the songwriter wants us to know that our noble service is proof of our faith in Jesus. And it's also proof of the fervor of our love. This is probably as important as anything, the fervor of our love. Fervor here stands for intense heat. Now think about that for a minute. The intense heat of our love, what is he saying? Well, the hymn writer is saying, talking about our great earnestness for Christ and his righteousness, our passion, our zeal for him and his righteousness to overcome the wickedness of this world. That's what he's talking about. Do you have that burning desire inside, that burning passion for Christ and his righteousness? When we sing that song, that's what we're saying. If you don't have that, you might reconsider why you sing that song. Because you're saying to the Lord, I have that. And the Lord can read your heart. And if it's not in your heart, that can be a scary thing. Our passionate, honorable service to God shows everyone our faith and fidelity in him, resulting from the fervor or the intense passion of our love for Christ and his righteousness. So when we sing that hymn, what are we saying to God, and what are we encouraging each other with? We're talking about loyalty to Christ. That means we don't have loyalty to the things of this world. You know, it's easy sometimes as Christians to get caught up in the worldly things. And if we don't recognize it quick enough, it can take us right back down under. It can engulf us again. And that's what Christ has brought us out of. So we don't want to go there. Sometimes we suffer that because of a lack of focus. Sometimes we suffer it because of like the quote I said at the beginning, that opportunities are guiding our loyalties. And we shouldn't allow that to happen. We need to stand against the power of sin and be loyal and true to Christ. The writer says we need to be loyal and be true. Be focused on Christ and living for him who died for us. He's our leader. He's our king. He leads us into battle and ultimately provides the victory of the day by day as we live our life. And in the end, for all eternity. Unlike the quote that we read at the start of this sermon, loyalty is a form of slavery. Because Paul reminds us in Romans 6 that we are slaves to righteousness. So loyalty to Christ and his righteousness, we are slaves. So there's one other thing I can guarantee you from that quote. If we are loyal to his righteousness, the Lord will appreciate what we bring to the table. I guarantee you that. So today you can decide where your loyalties lie. Are they with Christ? Do you have the guaranteed victory? If you're not there, do you want to be loyal to him? If so, we offer the opportunity now for you to come forward. Let us know that. Let us help you to become a loyal servant of Christ while we stand and sing.
To Christ be loyal and be true, his banner be unfurled, and borne aloft till is secured the conquest of the world. To Christ the Lord be true, for he will go with you and help you all your conflicts through. To Christ the Lord be true. To Christ be loyal and be true. He needs brave volunteers to stand against the powers of sin, moved not by frowns or fears. To Christ the Lord be true, for he will go with you and help you all your conflicts through. To Christ the Lord be true. To Christ be loyal and be true, in noble service prove your faith and your fidelity, the fervor of your love. To Christ the Lord be true, for he will go with you and help you all your conflicts through. To Christ the Lord be true. Amen. You may be seated.